nowadays we talk about state, political authority, and when and we immediately think of things like force and coercion, because what states do is that they issue directives and they back those directives up with threats of punishment. Even if you weren't public spirited, you'd still pay your taxes because you know that your goods would be seized and you'd be put in jail if you didn't. So coercion sounds a horrid word, but it's a legal term, very much part of the Catholic legal tradition, as actually in the secular world it's also used. And it means issuing directives and then backing those directives up with threats of punishment. The sorts of punishments that ill-willed people who might not otherwise be willing to obey the law might reasonably fear. They're obviously designed to motivate even the ill-willed to do what they're told. So there's the directive side to authority, which is the issue of the instructions, and then there's the coercive side to the authority, which is the threat of the sanctions or punishments, the bad things. And we tend to assume that the one authority that can do that, in a sovereign way at any rate, is the state. It's got the monopoly of legitimate force. And it's very important to Leo XIII that he doesn't think this. And this actually is a very important feature. He thinks that there are two kinds of sovereign coercive authority. There is the state. That's one, to use the Latin phrase potestas. Again, it's a technical term. It means a bearer of coercive authority, particularly a sovereign one. There's the state, the publica potestas, public power, but there's also the church, the ecclesial potestas. And that's a potestas too. The church is as much a coercive authority as the state. John Courtenay Murray didn't actually think this. About the time of Vatican II, Courtenay Murray says, if an authority exists that is empowered to restrain men from public action in accord with their religious beliefs, because of religious coercion, this authority can reside only in government, which presides over the juridical and social order. Well, a very important thing about Leo XIII is he would have disagreed with Courtenay Murray and did so. He thought the church could restrain men from public action in accord with their religious beliefs, because in relation to religion, it was actually the church that presided over the juridical order. We'll come back to that. So we've got a theory of two coercive powers, potestates, one of which is the church. Again, like any other coercive authority, its authority comes from God. So both church and state are powers, potestates, directly in different ways, but still directly instituted by God. And this is not what a lot of modern Catholics think. It's certainly not what secular people think. It's going to be very important that at Vatican II, the drafting commission, the commission that drafts Dignitatis Humanae, endorses Leo XIII's claim that the church is a potestas and uses it to explain the declaration. Not only are these two powers existing, but the fundamental of the Christian constitution of states is that the two powers should essentially coexist in a unity, an ordered unity. And an important part of the encyclical is how that...
When you say unity, you don't mean... when you say unity, it doesn't mean in the sense that there's no distinction between the two, but in the sense that there is a harmony of will,
yes.
Essentially.
They compose together a wider Christian community in any country, where there is a Christian state and the Catholic Church. But obviously they're distinct from each other. They have distinct, as we'll see, distinct forms of authority.
Yes.
And they have
that's what makes it different from a theocracy, right?
Absolutely. So there's going to be much of human life the church has no direct authority, legislative authority over. So both church and state are in the business of making laws and backing those laws up with threats of punishment. But much of what goes on in human life is not subject to church legal authority. Right. The church can teach about it, but it can't directly pass a law. So it could say that certain contracts, in its view, in her view, are immoral, But if it's just day-to-day commercial contracts, she has no authority of her own to change contract law. That's the state. She may admonish the
Yeah, so
state.
that's important to say for some people who might get overexcited in a kind of a reactionary
Yeah,
approach to this topic, and kind of want the church to be directly, ruling over all temporal affairs. That's not what Leo is saying here.
absolutely not. So there are two powers, each of which is sovereign in its sphere.